What are the sales books every salesperson needs to read and why? I've whittled down my list of sales books that not only I use, but everyone in my business uses. So here we go. In at number 1, it's the book I recommend to everyone in sales. It's You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike at a Seminar. Probably the book that was the most impactful on me in terms of light bulb moments, and a book that I found incredibly innovative to read, but was completely shocked when I saw that actually it came out in 1995. Now, this book taught me a lot in terms of different techniques, different approaches, different methodologies, and the psychology behind why we do them and why they're so effective. Some of the things that I would take away and recommend people to pick up on are things like the upfront contracts, the pain funnel, but probably more importantly, a thinking of pressure in sales shouldn't come from the salesperson and should be something that's shared between you and the prospect and constantly put back on the prospect in a way to make them comfortable with the idea of pressure and make pressure really a choice, which is what our whole sales methodology is based on at We Have a Meeting. In at number 2, it's Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference, which is a book around how hostage negotiation techniques can actually be used in a business setting. I honestly thought this book was probably one of the most practical sales books I'd maybe ever read, in terms of I can read a chapter, learn a technique, have a light bulb moment, go into work the next day and try it. Things to really look out for in this book are techniques like mirroring, labeling, and we really use those as a way to not just hammer people constantly with questions, and as a means to show people that 1, they're being listened to, and 2, that there's this sense of rapport that's not based on what's the weather like, what's your favourite football team. It's actually based on really getting in there and showing that you're listening to someone. So Never Split the Difference, I couldn't recommend highly enough for anyone that's struggling with questions, struggling with rapport building techniques, struggling with maybe active listening, which is a big part of the book, showing people that you're really listening. And I would say that anyone who reads it will find themselves being a better communicator almost immediately. Next up, we've got Keenan's Gap Selling. Now, we've been lucky enough to have Keenan on the podcast before. He's a great guy, really passionate, and I would probably suggest because of that, this book is best enjoyed on Audible. It's great to listen to on a dog walk on a Sunday night when you're trying to rev yourself back up for the working week. And it will really, really get you in the right gear to negotiate deals, to prospect. But I think probably the most important thing that I took away from that book is really the qualification framework that we use for any client that we work with. So regardless of sector, personality type, whoever it is that we're dealing with, we're trying to find out things that Keenan talks about in this book, Gap Selling. And those things are problem, example of the problem, the impact that problem's having, the root cause of that problem, and the last part, which a lot of the book is based on, the desired future state. And that really is where the gap comes in. So it's where is your prospect now, and then how do we find out where they want to be, and how do we use that gap as the lever or the anchor to create the sale on. So it's a great book. The latter chapters are probably ones that I would read over and over again, but as I say, more importantly, they're ones that I would have spoken to me by a passionate American who can really get me revved up, comes at me like a cold slap in the face. It gets me in gear for the week ahead. Not necessarily seen as a sales book, but in at number 4, I'd recommend The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. This book is more of a breakdown of human nature, psychology, history of people that became influential in their lives, and really asks you to do 5 things. So number 1, the book asks you to know yourself, to hold up the mirror in those moments where you feel frustrated with someone else and see a reflection of, are there times where I behaved in the same way, and why did I do that? So really it starts to lean on this sense of treating people with empathy first, and a sense of understanding rather than frustration, which is kind of a powerful skill when you're out there prospecting and selling every day. The second is to recognize the power of emotions. So as we all should well know, working in sales, people buy from emotion. They make decisions from an emotional place, and that emotion will often motivate them to make decisions. Number 3 is this idea of, I kind of alluded to it with point 1, but it's practicing empathy. So when I read this particular chapter in the book, I was thinking about how there have been real kind of narcissistic personalities that I've come across in my sales career, even leaders that I've worked with, and it's kind of understanding why does that personality type come about. And it's often from things that happen in childhood. There's really key things that tend to happen to make those personalities form. When you recognise that, you're not in a boardroom with a CEO who you can't stand anymore. You're really seeing a 6-year-old who probably didn't receive the love and care that they needed when they were a child, or maybe received too much. Number 4 is really understanding human nature. So understanding how people will deceive themselves to favour certain biases that exist in their brain, and they will tend to inform decisions irrationally, even without us really realising. So it's understanding, where do those biases exist in me? Where do they exist in my prospects? Where do they exist in clients that I've got? So you can spot when they're happening and kind of understand why they're happening as well. So it's a really, really deep delve into that part of the brain. And number 5, it's persuasion, but used effectively. So using persuasion as a means to build trust, create a sense of urgency, and really lean on people's self-interest, understanding where the line is between that and perhaps the more unethical things. And it gives real tangible examples of where they've happened in the past, why they've happened, what impact they've had, so you can really understand the nature of them moving forward. So those are 4 sales books that I recommend everyone consume. And as a bit of a bonus tip, I'm sure a lot of people do this anyway, but whenever you find an author or content that you really like, especially in the sales world, those are people that tend to have gone on to do podcasts and things like that themselves. When you hear it in conversation, you'll understand it a bit more, and obviously then when you apply it yourself, you'll understand it. So it's kind of like 3 phases, but you'll find that understanding things on a book will open up one part of the brain. When you hear someone talk about it in conversation on a podcast, you get kind of that deeper understanding, and then when you apply it yourself, you'll understand it even more. So it's really making sure that you thoroughly explore that research phase and thoroughly explore content around it, and then make sure you don't wait around too long. So the things that you read about from mirroring and labeling in Chris Voss's book, perhaps, that you apply them straight away, because the longer you think about it, you'll be hit with paralysis by analysis. So I hope you enjoyed it. 4 books, check them out, let me know what you think.